Your oil turned pitch black after just 500 miles, and the quick lube shop is already telling you something is wrong. After more than 2 decades in the shop, I have watched drivers waste thousands on flushes and repairs because someone scared them with a dark dipstick. Here is the truth. In about 8 out of 10 cases, black oil is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. But the other 2, that is how a $5,000 engine rebuild begins. Today, I am breaking down all 12 reasons engine oil turns black and the one reason you should never ignore. The first reason your oil turns black is actually the one most quick lube shops conveniently leave out. Modern engine oil is designed to get dirty on purpose. Today's oils are loaded with detergents and dispersants whose entire job is to scrub carbon, soot, and microscopic debris off metal surfaces and hold them in suspension. When combustion happens, it creates carbon. That carbon does not magically disappear. Good oil grabs it before it can bake onto piston rings and cam surfaces. When you pull the dipstick and see dark oil, what you are often seeing is oil that is actively cleaning your engine. If oil stayed honey-colored for thousands of miles, that would actually be a bad sign. It would mean the contaminants are sticking to your engine instead of floating in the oil. This is why new oil in a dirty engine can turn black in a matter of days. It is not failing, it is doing heavy cleanup. The danger here is not color, it is texture. If the oil feels gritty between your fingers or smells burned, that is when cleaning turns into damage. Color alone tells you nothing unless you know what is happening behind it. The second reason your oil turns black faster than expected has nothing to do with oil quality and everything to do with how you drive. Short trips are brutal on engines. When you drive only a few miles at a time, your engine never reaches full operating temperature. Moisture from the air condenses inside the crankcase overnight, like water on a cold glass. Normally, that moisture boils off once the oil hits around 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But if you shut the engine off too soon, the water stays. That trapped moisture mixes with fuel byproducts and sulfur, forming acids inside the oil. Those acids attack the oil's additive package, causing it to darken rapidly and lose its protective ability long before the mileage says it should. This is why cars driven gently around town often have worse oil conditions than highway commuters. The oil isn't just dirty, it's chemically breaking down. If you ever see milky residue under the oil cap or oil that turns black within a few hundred miles in a grocery getter car, this is usually why. The fix isn't an additive. It is longer drives that fully heat-soak the oil and allow moisture to burn off. The third reason is one almost no drivers ever check, yet it is responsible for some of the fastest oil contamination I have seen in the shop. The positive crankcase ventilation valve, often called the PCV valve. This small, inexpensive plastic valve controls how blow-by gases escape your engine. During normal operation, a small amount of combustion gases slip past the piston rings and enter the crankcase. Those gases are full of soot, fuel vapor, and moisture. The PCV system is designed to pull those contaminants out and send them back into the intake to be burned. When the PCV valve clogs or sticks, which is extremely common after 60,000 miles, those gases have nowhere to go. Pressure builds, forcing dirty vapors directly into the oil. The result is oil that turns pitch black almost immediately after a change. Many engines with mysterious oil issues do not need rebuilds or flushes. They need a $10 valve replaced. If your oil turns black fast and smells like fuel, this is one of the first things that should be checked, yet it is almost always ignored. These first 3 causes already show the pattern. Black oil is not the enemy. Not understanding why it is black is. And the next reasons are where things start getting far more expensive if you miss them. Reason number 4 is something almost no driver thinks about, yet it silently darkens oil faster than almost anything else: a failing oil filter doing its job at the wrong time. Most people assume an oil filter either works or it does not. That is a dangerous oversimplification. Inside every oil filter is a bypass valve, a spring-loaded safety door that opens when oil pressure gets too high or when the filter media becomes restricted. On a cold start, thick oil struggles to pass through the filter. The bypass opens briefly to prevent oil starvation. That part is normal. The problem starts when cheap filters or worn filters open that bypass far too often, or never fully close again. When that happens, oil stops being filtered entirely. It circulates raw. Every bit of soot, carbon, metal dust, and combustion byproduct stays suspended in the oil instead of being trapped. The oil turns black quickly because it is being reused over and over without being cleaned. I have cut open hundreds of filters over the years, and the difference between a quality filter and a bargain bin one is shocking. Cheap filters use weak springs, thin media, and inconsistent seals. Once they clog even slightly, the bypass opens and stays open. From that moment on, your engine is running on unfiltered oil. The driver sees black oil and assumes the engine is dirty. In reality, the filter failed first. This is why some engines turn oil black in 300 miles, while others stay clean for thousands on the same oil. The filter is not just a container, it is a pressure-regulated system. When it fails quietly, your oil becomes a circulating trash bin, and the color change is the first visible warning. Reason number 5 is direct fuel dilution, and this one separates harmless black oil from genuinely dangerous black oil. When gasoline leaks past the piston rings and mixes with the oil, it changes everything. Fuel thins oil. It destroys viscosity. It strips protective film from bearings and cylinder walls, and it accelerates oxidation dramatically. The oil turns black not because it is cleaning, but because it is chemically breaking down. This usually happens for one of 3 reasons: short trips that never allow the engine to fully warm up, faulty injectors that drip instead of atomize, or an engine running excessively rich due to sensor errors. When fuel enters the oil, it does not always smell obvious right away. Many drivers miss it because modern oils mask the scent, but the damage is happening instantly. The oil loses its ability to protect under load. Bearings wear faster, timing chains stretch, turbochargers fail early. And because fuel burns hotter inside the crankcase, the oil darkens rapidly from thermal stress. I have seen engines destroyed in under 30,000 miles from mild fuel dilution that went unnoticed because the car felt fine. The oil looked dark, and the driver assumed it was normal. It was not. Fuel dilution is one of the few situations where black oil is not just a symptom, but a countdown timer. If your oil level mysteriously rises between changes, if cold starts feel rough, or if fuel economy drops while oil darkens fast, that is not normal aging. That is raw gasoline eating your engine from the inside. Reason number 6 is turbocharger heat soak, and even naturally aspirated drivers should pay attention, because the lesson applies to all engines. Turbochargers expose oil to temperatures most drivers never consider. After hard driving, exhaust temperatures can exceed 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The turbo housing absorbs that heat. When you shut the engine off immediately, oil flow stops, but the heat does not. The oil trapped inside the turbo bearing housing literally cooks. This process, called coking, turns oil into hard carbon deposits. Those microscopic burnt particles eventually break loose and circulate through the engine, darkening the oil and increasing abrasion. What makes this dangerous is how invisible it is. The oil looks fine when you pour it in. The turbo feels fine. The engine runs fine. But each hot shutdown adds another layer of cooked oil to the system. Over time, the oil turns black faster and faster because it is carrying carbonized debris that no detergent package can fully neutralize. Even non-turbocharged engines experience localized heat soak in areas like piston ring lands and valve train components, but turbos accelerate the process dramatically. This is why turbo engines that follow extended oil change intervals suffer catastrophic failures far earlier than expected. The oil is not just dirty, it is thermally destroyed. And once that process starts, changing oil alone does not fix the damage already circulating. The black color is the aftermath, not the cause. One of the fastest ways oil turns black shows up as reason 7, and it is one of the most misunderstood traps drivers fall into: the cheap oil illusion. You walk into an auto parts store and see two jugs that look identical. Both say full synthetic in big letters. One costs $22, the other costs $55. Most people assume the expensive one is just branding and grab the cheaper jug, believing oil is oil. That assumption quietly sabotages engines every day. In many regions, especially North America, oil companies are legally allowed to label highly refined crude oil as synthetic. These are Group 3 base oils. True synthetics, Group 4 and Group 5, are chemically engineered from natural gas or esters. The difference is not marketing, it is chemistry. Cheap synthetic oil has much higher volatility, meaning it literally evaporates when exposed to heat. Inside your engine, oil regularly sees temperatures above 220 degrees Fahrenheit, and in turbocharged engines it goes far higher. When low-quality oil heats up, the lightest molecules boil off first and exit through the PCV system as vapor. What stays behind is a darker, thicker, more concentrated mixture of additives and heavy base oil. That leftover oil oxidizes faster, traps soot more aggressively, and turns black far sooner. Drivers then assume the engine is dirty or worn out when the oil itself is failing. I have seen engines stop burning oil entirely simply by switching to a low volatility, high quality synthetic. No leaks, no smoke, just chemistry finally doing its job. The next quiet destroyer is reason 8, and it doesn't require aggressive driving at all. Turbochargers quietly cook your oil. Modern turbos are everywhere now, from compact sedans to family SUVs, and they expose engine oil to conditions it was never meant to handle a decade ago. A turbocharger is driven by exhaust gases that can exceed 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and the turbo shaft can spin at up to 200,000 RPM. That shaft is lubricated entirely by engine oil. When you shut off the engine, oil flow stops instantly, but the heat does not. The oil trapped inside the turbo bearing housing literally bakes. This process, called coking, breaks oil molecules apart and carbonizes them into hard, abrasive particles. Those particles do not stay trapped forever. They eventually circulate through the engine, darkening and contaminating the oil further. Even drivers who idle briefly before shutdown aren't immune. Heat soak in traffic, short trips, and repeated high-load conditions all push oil beyond its thermal limits. Over time, detergents are consumed, dispersants saturate, and the oil turns black, not because it's dirty, but because it's chemically damaged. This is why turbo engines that follow long oil change intervals often develop timing chain wear, stuck piston rings, and sludge years earlier than expected. If your car is turbocharged and the oil turns black rapidly, that oil hasn't just aged, it has been cooked. Then there is reason 9, one of the most dangerous and hardest to spot causes of black oil: fuel dilution. This happens when raw gasoline slips past the piston rings and mixes directly into the oil. It does not just discolor the oil, it destroys its protective properties from the inside out. Modern engines, especially direct injection designs, are far more prone to fuel dilution than older engines. Cold starts are the biggest culprit. When the engine is cold, extra fuel is injected to stabilize combustion. That excess fuel washes down the cylinder walls before the rings fully seal, and some of it ends up in the oil pan. Short trips make this dramatically worse because the oil never reaches a high enough temperature to evaporate the fuel. Instead, fuel accumulates, thinning the oil and breaking down additives. The oil darkens quickly and loses its ability to protect bearings. Often you can smell this problem before you see it. Pull the dipstick and sniff. If it smells strongly of gasoline, that black color is a warning sign. Fuel dilution accelerates oxidation, which darkens the oil even faster, and thin oil allows more blow-by, introducing even more soot. That vicious cycle is why some engines show severe wear despite regular oil changes. At that point, the oil was no longer really oil. It was diluted fuel pretending to protect metal. Reason number 10 is the one almost everyone gets wrong, and it starts with who you trusted instead of how you drive. One of the biggest reasons engine oil turns black long before you expect it has nothing to do with abuse and everything to do with modern oil change intervals. Those intervals are not designed around engine longevity, they are designed around marketing. Car manufacturers compete on something called cost of ownership, and one of the easiest ways to make a car look cheaper to maintain is to stretch oil change intervals on paper. That is how the industry quietly moved from 3,000 miles to 5,000 to 7,500, and now to 10,000 or even 15,000 miles in some owners' manuals. Here is the part they do not explain. Oil is not just oil. It is a base stock plus a complex additive package. The base oil might survive that long in a laboratory under perfect conditions, but the additives absolutely do not. Detergents, dispersants, and acid neutralizers all have a finite lifespan. Once they are depleted, the oil can no longer hold soot in suspension. The moment that happens, contamination accelerates rapidly. The oil darkens, thickens, and starts depositing sludge instead of carrying debris safely to the filter. In real-world driving, short trips, stop-and-go traffic, high heat, and fuel dilution, those additives are often exhausted by 5,000 to 6,000 miles. After that point, every mile you drive is grinding contaminants through your engine. The oil did not suddenly get dirty. It became chemically overwhelmed. When your oil turns black far before the interval printed on your dash, it is not because the engine is bad. It is because the interval was never realistic to begin with. Long intervals make sense for warranty survival, not long-term engine health. Reason number 11 hides in plain sight, screwed directly onto the engine, and most drivers never give it a second thought. People obsess over oil brands and completely ignore the oil filter. That single mistake can turn oil black at an alarming rate. Cheap oil filters are built with thin filter media and poorly calibrated bypass valves. That bypass valve is only supposed to open when oil is extremely thick or pressure is dangerously high, such as during a cold start. On a quality filter, that might happen at 12 to 18 pounds per square inch. On bargain filters, it can open as low as 5 pounds per square inch. What does that mean in real life? It means every time you accelerate, climb a hill, or raise engine speed, unfiltered oil bypasses the filter entirely. The oil keeps circulating, but the contaminants never get removed. Soot, carbon, metal particles, and combustion byproducts just keep building up. The oil turns black rapidly because it is never actually being cleaned. This is why some engines turn oil black even after very frequent oil changes. The oil is doing its job, but the filter is failing at its only purpose. Drivers blame fuel quality, engine design, or oil brand, when the real culprit is a $5 filter that never should have been installed. A high-quality oil filter does not just protect the engine. It keeps oil cleaner longer by forcing contaminants into the media instead of letting them recirculate. If your oil goes black fast and you are using bargain filters, you are effectively washing your engine with dirty oil on purpose. Reason number 12 is the one you can't afford to ignore, because this is where black oil stops being normal and starts being a warning. Most of the time, dark oil is harmless, but there is one situation where it is genuinely dangerous. When oil turns black almost immediately and smells strongly of fuel or exhaust, you may be looking at severe internal wear. This is often caused by worn piston rings or damaged cylinder walls. In a healthy engine, piston rings seal combustion pressure inside the cylinder. When they wear out, exhaust gases blast past the rings and straight into the crankcase. This is called blow-by. That blow-by carries soot, unburned fuel, and acids directly into the oil. No detergent package can handle that volume of contamination. The oil turns black in days or even hours. You'll often notice other signs if you know where to look. Excessive vapor puffing from the oil fill cap, a strong gasoline smell on the dipstick, rising oil level instead of falling, and rough cold starts that slowly improve as the engine warms. In these cases, the oil isn't the problem. It's the messenger. This is the one time black oil isn't normal, isn't harmless, and isn't something you should ignore. Additives won't fix it. Thicker oil won't save it. Longer intervals won't help. When oil turns black almost instantly due to internal blow-by, the engine is telling you that the seal between combustion and lubrication is failing. Most drivers never realize this distinction. They keep changing oil, hoping the color improves. It never does. And by the time they understand why, the damage is already done. If this saves you money or stress, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. The next video exposes another maintenance myth that shops do not want you to understand.